Creation didn't begin with peace, it began with blood. The gods were not born in love, they were born in rebellion against their mother. Her name was Tiamat, and from her broken body they shaped the world. I'm James, this is Mythic Tides. Before gods carved sky from sea and shaped stars into constellations, there was water, unending, unyielding, untamed. She was Tiamat, the sea made conscious, a goddess of salt water and storm, mother of gods, and in time, monstrous queen of cosmic war. Tiamat's story is preserved in the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian 7 Tablets of Creation. The poem dates from the late 2nd millennia BCE. Tiamat begins not as a villain, but as the wellspring of all things divine. In the beginning, she mingles with Abzu, the god of fresh water. Their union, salt and sweet, births the first generation of gods. But the divine offspring, it turns out, are noisy, unruly things. They stir the waters, disrupt the quiet, and offend the sensibilities of their elder creators. Abzu is furious. He wishes to destroy them. A bit of mythic house cleaning, if you will. Tiamat, however, intervenes. She warns her son Aya, and in a swift act of preemptive patricide, Aya kills Abzu in his sleep. The old order is overthrown. At first, Tiamat mourns, but grief turns to rage. Goaded by her new consort, Kingu, and the older gods, she takes up arms, or rather, she creates them. 11 terrifying monsters, from serpents and dragons to scorpion men and storm beasts. Chaos incarnate. The younger gods, understandably alarmed, convene. They need a champion. Enter Marduk, god of storms and judgment, a divine tactician with wind at his command and ambition in his heart. He offers to fight Tiamat on one condition, that he be made king of all gods if he succeeds. It's a classic celestial deal. The gods agree. Armed with a net, a bow, and 7 mighty winds, Marduk confronts Tiamat in a duel that is less battle and more symbolic execution. He let fly an arrow and pierced her belly. He tore open her entrails and slit her inwards. He bound her and extinguished her life. He threw down her corpse and stood on it. With this final blow, Tiamat's body is split in two, not buried, but repurposed. From one half, Marduk creates the sky, from the other, the earth. Her eyes become the source of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Her tail becomes the arch of the heavens. Her breasts, mountains. Her tears, the seas. Creation here is not a gift, it's an act of conquest. This motif repeats across cultures. In Norse myth, Ymir the giant is slain and carved into the world. In Hindu cosmology, the cosmic being Purusha is sacrificed to birth creation. The idea is old, primal. The cosmos as the remains of a divine being, the world as a sacred aftermath. With Tiamat defeated, Marduk faces a new problem. Someone must tend this freshly carved world. The gods, after all, have grown quite fond of reclining. The solution: Kingu. Tiamat's second consort, general of her monstrous forces, is captured, condemned, and sacrificed. From his blood, Aya creates the first human. Marduk opened his mouth, addressing Aya. He counsels that which he had pondered in his heart. I will bring together blood to form bone. I will bring into being Lulu, whose name shall be man. I will create Lulu, man, on whom the toil of the gods will be laid, that they may rest. And so humanity enters the stage, not as rulers, not as chosen, but as labourers. We were made to bear the burden of the gods, divine servants in a world built from divine death. But what of Kingu, the shadowed figure in Tiamat's tragic hymn? He is more than general, more than consort. Kingu is the vessel of destiny. To him, Tiamat grants the Tablet of Destinies, the glittering sigil of divine sovereignty, the very law that commands the cosmos. In her rising fury, she chooses him not only as commander of her monstrous legion, but as heir. Kingu is enthroned by chaos itself, anointed not with oil, but with the rage, crowned not in temples, but amid the foam of a storm-sick sea. And yet, his reward is extinction. He does not fall gloriously in battle, nor retreat into mythic exile. He is captured, slain. His sacred blood, divine ichor, drained and poured, not upon altars, but into the dust. It is from this mingling of God and ground, bone and burden, that humans are formed. We are not shaped from clay alone, but from consequence. Not born of light, but of liability. Kingu's blood becomes the mortar of mortality. His rebellion becomes our inheritance. Some scholars speak of this as mythic irony, that the most powerful being in Tiamat's rank is reduced to material used to fashion frail things, us. That from the blood of a god meant to rule came a species destined to serve. Others see it as a cruel poetry, a cosmic reminder that power does not simply pass from the vanquished to the victors, but seeps into the very earth. That our bones remember wars we never fought. That from the fall of Kingu, the human story begins, not in triumph, but in aftermath. In the Enuma Elish, the Tablet of Destinies is no mere relic. It is the command of the cosmos. To hold it is to hold the structure of fate, the will of the gods inscribed on sacred stone. Kingu is entrusted with it, not by birthright, but by Tiamat's will. And for that, the heavens recoil. When Marduk seizes the tablet, his victory is not just over chaos, but over cosmic authorship. It's the oldest idea in empire, that whoever holds the words controls the world. As Babylon rose, so did Marduk. Under Hammurabi, the famed lawgiver king of the 18th century BCE, Marduk was elevated to supreme deity, his myth used to justify royal authority and empire. And Tiamat, relegated to a shadow, cast as the monstrous feminine, chaos incarnate, an adversary vanquished. Tiamat is not worshipped, not anymore. There are no temples to her now, no sacrifices at twilight, no priests whispering her name into darkness. She has no cult, no feast day, no carved idols bathed in rosewater and blood. Instead, her name lingers in myth. Her death, her murder, is celebrated. Each spring, the Babylonians gathered for the Akitu festival, their grand New Year rite. For 12 days, they chanted the Enuma Elish, the tale of creation in which Marduk rises and Tiamat falls. And as the story unfolded, day after day, they were not simply recalling a battle, they were reaffirming a world in which chaos had been conquered, where the wild, the feminine, the untamed had been slain and shaped into law, land, and legacy. So yes, the gods may fall, but it's the victors who are worshipped. Tiamat became the body of the world, but not its heart. That was given to her killers. And yet, in the hush between verses, in the lull between drums, in the long silence after the final chant, her sea still dreams. The myth of Tiamat invites a broader reflection on how ancient cultures may have framed power, order, and womanhood, especially during periods of social transformation. Here was a deity who was both generative and destructive, maternal and monstrous. In her earliest form, Tiamat is a cosmic womb, the salty sea where gods are conceived. But once she resists, once she rages, her nurturing nature is rewritten into menace. Some scholars interpret this transformation as symbolic of a wider cultural shift. As patriarchal systems and state structures developed, myth often began to portray powerful female figures not as revered creators, but as threats to be conquered. Gaia, once mother of all, is sidelined. Sekhmet in Egypt must be pacified. Eve becomes the source of the fall. From this perspective, Tiamat's demonization echoes the fate of many ancient goddesses during these times of centralization and control. She's not simply slain, she is systematically rewritten. However, this interpretation is not without debate. Other scholars caution against reading these myths as direct socio-political allegories. They argue that while the gendered symbolism is present, it may reflect mythic structure more than lived power dynamics, and that the evidence for a widespread matriarchal past remains inconclusive. Today, many revisit these stories not to erase the fearsome aspects of these figures, but to understand them, to see in their defiance a kind of holiness, just as Lilith has been reimagined not as a succubus, but as a symbol of feminine autonomy. So too is Tiamat reclaimed, not as a villain, but as a force, as frontier, as a roar behind creation. She's not evil, she's unbounded. She does not lie in wait, she surges. Chaos, yes, but chaos as the crucible of becoming. Tiamat is not alone in the deep. Across the mythologies, the sea coils with serpents. In Egypt, Apep slithers beneath the Ra's sunbark. In the Bible, Leviathan thrashes in the primordial waters. In Norse myth, Jörmungandr encircles the world, waiting to strike. The chaos serpent is everywhere. Not villain, not god, but the pressure before the pulse, the darkness before the light. To speak of Tiamat is not just to speak of Babylon, but to touch the spine of myth itself. Before the 19th century, the Bible was widely believed in the West to be the oldest book in the world. That belief was disrupted by the discovery of older Mesopotamian and Indian texts, like the Enuma Elish and the Rig Veda, which may predate the Bible by centuries. Some scholars point to similarities between the Enuma Elish and Genesis, others argue the differences matter more. The Enuma Elish reflects the Mesopotamian vision of the cosmos, order carved from chaos. These myths share common themes across cultures. Genesis, the formless void and water motif. Greek myth, chaos preceding the gods. Norse myth, Ymir's death forming the world. Though her name may no longer echo in temples, Tiamat is alive and well, reborn in the fertile soil of the imagination. In Dungeons and Dragons, she reigns as the five-headed queen of evil dragons, a gargantuan godlike entity who rules the infernal plane of Avernus. Each of her heads represents a different chromatic dragon, red, blue, green, black and white, and each breathes destruction of its own flavour. In the early 1980s, Tiamat stormed onto Saturday morning television screens in the Dungeons and Dragons animated series, and she did not come quietly. Unlike many villains of the era, she was not comic relief, she was not henchwoman, not final boss, not damsel undone, she was the terror in the dark. When she appeared, even the show's primary antagonist, this conniving venger, cowered in her shadow. Tiamat was rendered with 5 snarling dragon heads, each of a different colour, each capable of breathing a distinct elemental doom: acid, ice, fire, lightning, poison. But it wasn't just spectacle, it was tone. She didn't monologue, she growled, roared, judged. She was portrayed not as a villain to be beaten, but as a force to be avoided. To a generation of young viewers, she became their first brush with a truly mythic antagonist, a being beyond good and evil, older than conflict, uninterested in conquest because she was, and always would be, sovereign. In Final Fantasy, Tiamat appears again and again, often as a massive serpentine boss who commands elemental fury. Her form shifts across titles, but her symbolism remains: chaos, power, and a reminder that ancient wrath is never far from awakening. She makes an appearance in Magic the Gathering as a legendary dragon god, summoned with fanfare, awe, and no small amount of fear. In World of Warcraft, she subtly echoes through figures like Deathwing and the dragon aspects, primordial beings of world-shaping power, often battling the tension between order and chaos. In fan art, webcomics, fantasy novels, and retellings, Tiamat lives on, often not as a villain, but as a misunderstood force. Not chaos for chaos' sake, but as the crucible from which all things are forged. In all of these, she reminds us that chaos is not always the adversary. Sometimes it's simply the origin, the necessary shattering before shape, the storm before stars. To speak of Tiamat is to speak of what lies beneath myth, beneath memory, beneath the soft stitchings of the world itself. She reminds us that before there was order, there was motion. Before there was law, there was wildness. And before the gods ruled from on high, there was a sea, vast, unbroken, dreaming silently of stars. We do not leave her in defeat, but in reverence. Tiamat, mother of all things, the chaos that carved room for creation, the silence that came before the word, and perhaps, just perhaps, the sea to which all stories return. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It really helps other people find Mythic Tides. If you get something to say about Tiamat, let us know in the comments. This has been James from Mythic Tides. I hope to see you again soon.